420 on the microwave. But it ain't 420 on the stove yet. It's an auspicious enough time for me to take my fucking retard meds. How are you, I? Welcome to CG Woo-Woo. This is the show that features the outre, the weird, the Fortean, and whatever the fuck else I think is cool. I am your host, John XD, or whatever the fuck I decide I'm calling myself today. And for our first Fortean item, we are going to be discussing something that dovetails into my book, The Scroll of Light and Darkness. The imagery you're seeing in the slideshow for this episode has to do with basically the chief deities in my story, A Scroll of Light and Darkness. These are the outre, and that's a term that I borrowed from the Mandaeans, which is a name that they give their gods or higher beings. They're called outres, and then in plural they're called outhrai. And they're basically spiritually undifferentiated hermaphroditic light beings that come from outside of space-time, and they express themselves through different permutations and different vibrational frequencies to different races throughout the universe, and they basically spread enlightenment, and they're like the chief deities in this Gnostic scripture that this Gnostic cult has in the dark fantasy horror novel, A Scroll of Light and Darkness. And they all represent when I came up with them, they all represent different spheres on the Sephiroth, on the Kabbalistic tree of life, and I gave them all the names of the Mandaic equivalents of the Hebrew names. So if you're familiar with the Kabbalah, the top sphere on the tree of life is Kether. The crown in Mandaic, it's Kitra. So and I used there are different color coding systems for different spheres on the Kabbalah, but this is just sort of a mishmash of color coding that I got from certain Kabbalistic texts that I studied, and also certain New Age groups like the Ascended Masters groups, a la Guy Ballard, and then the later cults that came after that group. But basically, a lot of the spheres were based on the color coding of the little Ascended Masters groups that the Lords of the Seven Rays and whatnot, if you know what I'm talking about. But it basically has to do with New Age spirituality that's sort of a mishmash of ancient Buddhism and Hinduism, just rehashed for an American New Age audience. But anyway, that's my little assessment. I hope I didn't get anyone butthurt about that. But these outhrai basically appoint their most enlightened disciples to become Malki, and that's a word that comes from Aramaic and Hebrew, which means it's a word that has three different meanings. It can mean an angel, it can mean a king, and it can mean a priest. It's all the same word, Malki. And so that's where I borrowed that name. But basically, they're like an intergalactic sort of warrior, sort of chivalric order, and basically all of the Malki that are appointed by the outhrai in my story are my reinventing of the Egyptian gods. So that's sort of the mythology of the Gnostic scripture in my story. But as I said, I'm not giving too much away because you don't know the details of the story, and I'm giving the details of the story within the story. Like I said, it's kind of like an onion, kind of like a Russian novel in that way. But that's what these images are of the outre. And so Kether, the crown is Kitra, and then Bina is the same in Mandaic, Aramaic, and in Hebrew. Hokmah is Hakumta. Um, Da'ath is Odat. Um, Gebura is Goarta. Hod is Hus. Tipereth is Sapira. Yetzira is Hydra or Hydra. And I know the Mandaic term. I forgot the other. I forgot the lower right hand sphere in Hebrew, but it's Zakuta in Mandaic, and then Yesod is Osadta, and Malkuth is Malakut, and so those are the names I gave for the outre in this story, and that's these are AI generated images that I fed into the AI, giving them descriptions of the outres, and also some original art um, of the outres are on my old art page. Some of the early concept art I was doing when I was first coming up with these ideas, and so that's what this is. And the and then the second item I'm going to deal with is Fortean. It sort of has to do with this as well. The aesthetic of the outres, I tried to pattern them on Lord Ardhanarishvara, which in Hinduism is the hermaphroditic combination of Shiva and Shakti together, and so that's because all of these beings were sort of a mixture of Kabbalah and this Shayavite concept. That was the aesthetic that I was going for in designing what they looked like. And for the next item, this is not related to my book, but it's definitely creepy, and it sort of has to do with, speaking of Shaivism. There is a sect known as the Agori, and they are basically Shiavite monastics who live basically among the cremation grounds, and they practice a very severe form of left-handed asceticism, where they all action is considered, I guess, relative. This is my understanding as an outsider from what I've studied about it, but they practice the Vama Marg, which is the left-hand path, and in order to obtain moksha or stillness in a meditative state, they perform extreme acts to ensure that even in agitated states they can maintain the moksha and the stillness. And so people who practice the left hand path take on a type of madness that where they do things that seem evil or insane, and they do this sort of as a spiritual practice to it's sort of like a radical form of non-attachment. But anyway, there's all sorts of legends and horror stories about the Agori among other Indians and among the British who have encountered them over the centuries, and in modern times as well. But there was the famous CNN reporter who interviewed some Agori, and they made him eat human brains and feces, and then the head Agori almost killed him. He kept threatening to cut his head off if he didn't stop talking. And so it was a really weird, intense little exchange in that interview. It almost reminded me of something that you would see on the Vice channel. But the Agori are, they have legends surrounding them, a lot like the Thugis, that were sort of popularized in our pop culture in the Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom movie. But the Agoris are known, for practicing cannibalism, because since they live around the cremation mounds, they eat the meat off of corpses, and they drink blood and alcohol, and they smoke a lot of cannabis. And so there's and they also practice black magic. And so it's they're not quite analogous to, say, the Native American skinwalkers, but they sort of have that sort of ambiance of horror around them. And I think that would be an interesting thing to explore, to perhaps parallel these two. There's also a slideshow on my YouTube channel here that says "My Life with the Skinwalker Cult," and that was an AI slideshow that I made that was trying to show, like, what life among skinwalkers would look like, among themselves. And it. I thought it was pretty creepy, but um, that is this item. And for the next Fortean item, we're going to talk a little bit about Lemuria. Now, I am of the opinion that Lemuria is based, the legends of Lemuria are based on Sundaland. I think that of all of the geological evidence, that is the best candidate for Lemuria. And if you're not sure what Lemuria is, Lemuria is kind of like a Pacific equivalent of Atlantis. In some of the Theosophical and later New Age tracts, it talks about Lemuria being, um, you know, a precursor to Atlantis, like in such a far distant past, it was even before Atlantis. And some of the first civilizations apparently came from Lemuria. And another interesting thing about Lemuria, and this sort of dovetails into what I was talking about earlier, about the hermaphroditic beings that were, the outre. But the writings of Madame Blavatsky talk about the early Lemurians being hermaphroditic, and only later did they evolve and differentiate into male and female. And so, in this legend, when humans differentiated into male and female, it happened there in Lemuria. And so I'm not sure about all of that, but it's based on some type of mythology and legend, and I believe that it came from an early civilization that lived on Sundaland. Um, I was I was convinced of this, you know, decades ago, when I studied the mythology and looked at the geological evidence for Sundaland. And this was before I knew anything about the archaeological finds and the megalithic structures that Graham Hancock so famously brought attention to in his Netflix series. But Gunung Padang is what I'm talking about. I was blown away when I found out about Gunung Padang, and that, and earlier megalithic structures all over the world is showing that human civilization is much older than what we had originally thought. And of course, it's still on the fringe, because there's literally centuries of people's academic careers that are completely obsolete now. And people in positions of power and influence aren't going to allow that to happen. I was told by someone who moved around in academic circles that it really is the last great refuge from learning, and it really doesn't have a lot to do with truth and true objectivity. It has more to do with an old boys network protecting their academic careers at all costs, and if someone comes along, some upstart comes along with something that you know threatens their clout, they're going to do everything they can to discredit that person, whether what their research is putting forth is true or not. But but I'm so Sunderland being Lemuria. I swear I'm getting Alzheimer's. Could be worse though. It could be Alzheimer's. But thank you, folks. But I believe that, like I said, Lemuria is definitely based on the reality of a very, very early megalithic civilization that lived in Sundaland. Um, it was, a very large subcontinent that was much larger than India. And when the polar ice caps melted, and the sea levels rose, that was the largest landmass that was covered with water, and it was covered with water, very rapidly. And Indonesia is a series of large islands now, which were pretty much the mountaintops of the continent of Sundaland, and most of the continent is now submerged in the South China Sea, and that's only about 500 feet deep, so it's a relatively shallow sea in and around these islands, and it's the third most populous country in the world, and they have all kinds of fascinating ancient history. The ancient tribal history among the pagans there, the Balinese Hinduism that has survived on the island of Bali, and then the Sufi mystic traditions that flourish in Indonesia among the Islamic culture. It's quite an amazing and fascinating people, but I really do believe that that theirs is probably if the present day inhabitants there aren't the direct descendants of these early peoples, and I don't see why they wouldn't be, at least partially. Um, but I mean, they're sitting on top of the oldest civilization on Earth. Essentially, that's what my personal opinion is. And so, but yes, even though Indonesia is an Islamic government, um, and most of the people are Muslim, there is a very large Hindu minority, and they all flock to the island of Bali. And so, Balinese Hinduism is very distinct from Indian Hinduism. It has more of a Southeast Asian flavor to it, but it really is fascinating, just the different festivals and things that they have there. So I take all kinds of really interesting riffs on all this shit in my soon to be published novel, A Scroll of Light and Darkness. Look for it soon. And now we're gonna take in a hoedown. As the great Rob Zombie says. Yeah, fuck everyone who doesn't like Rob Zombie movies. I think he's brilliant. Y'all just don't get his art and his aesthetic. I really dig his music, really dig his movies. I totally get what he's doing. Don't know anything about his politics, and frankly, I don't give two shits. That's my attitude towards celebrities. I don't care about their politics, but really, really dig his art. And with that, y'all noticed the little Chicago accent I pulled there, and it probably sounds horrible to people who are from Chicago, but I did a little comedy piece. There's another film on my YouTube channel where I have like comedy persona called Metropolitan Ditkislav Kowalski, and my friend Eric thought it was pretty cool. But anyway, for some reason, when I'm acting like a mook and I'm doing a fake accent, I don't stumble all over my words quite as much. I get loosened up a bit, if you know what I'm saying. But that's another thing I have on my channel. Yeah, I'll take one Sinatra Crowns of Martyrdom, baptize it with some gardeniera and onions, and buff them up real nice, would you? That was a little Chicago accent that dovetailed into an obnoxious New York accent. I am a mook, I freely admit it. Let me give you my signs. My main astrological sign is Pisces. My solar sign is Aries. My lunar sign is Pisces. Pisces, Aries, Pisces. Retard, asshole, retard. I often joke that I'm an asshole sandwich between a crispy retard shell. I was down to talk to my doctor about whatever the fuck the new religion is trying to pimp off on us. Whatever the fuck I'm telling you under this stupid fedora. Now I can go home and butt chug some kombucha. What more? Okay, and now I'm gonna go back to being a retard and talk to you about the nerd stuff, because I know that's what you tuned in for. The Freemasons are Satanists, and we will prove this to you with their own writings. No, I'm only kidding. Speaking of which, Count Cagliostro, which was an Italian counterpart to the mysterious figure of the Comte de Saint Germain, he was sort of a similar figure. He actually tried to convince the Pope of the veracity of a certain Masonic rite that he had composed called the Rite of Memphis and Mizraim. And this particular rite is rejected by mainstream Freemasons, and he ended up, I believe, being in prison for the rest of his life over it. But what you call black lodges, not as an African American, although there are Prince Hall lodges that do practice the rite of Memphis and Mizraim, but they're called black lodges by mainstream Masons because it's considered to be contraband. That's all it really means. It doesn't really mean black magic, although it is the most religious and mystical and magical rite within Freemasonry, even though it's not a mainstream one. But it is used by certain occult lodges, most particularly the Ordo Templi Orientis, which is probably the most famous black lodge, contraband Masonic lodge, and they do use the rite of Memphis and Mizraim, and it's very similar, from what I understand, to the rite where you summon the Holy Guardian Angel. Oh my goodness, I can't believe I forgot the name of that rite. Oh, the Abramelin rite, and where essentially you summon the Holy Guardian Angel, which is not like your nativity or birth angel. It's supposed to be according to this system's philosophy. You're summoning, the part of you that is part of God, or the part of God that is, that corresponds to you, or the archetypal perfect image of you, like the Platonic forms almost. But that's what the Holy Guardian Angel is in these occult circles. And yes, Count Cagliostro composed the rite of Memphis and Mizraim, which is used in the contraband or black Masonic lodges. Another little teaser, you see a lot of these pictures of these lynx men fighting out in the desert with mountains in the background, and this is part of the Dark Scroll, which is part 2 of my book, Scroll of Light and Darkness. All of it's been written, by the way, and so all of it's going to be released when I publish the book. But it without, again, I'm not giving too much away. This is just another little teaser. But the Lithral are essentially a race of lynx men. I'm not going to say where they're from yet, but it's in the book. And these are battles from their ancient history before they evolved into the winged creatures that you see in the Lithral AI-generated concept art that's on my YouTube channel. It's called the Lithral, and also I have some drawings that I did of some female Lithral on my art page, and you can link to my old art page on my about tab. There's a link to my old art page. Again, I just want to warn you, if you're a deeply religious person, you might not want to look at it, because these are old pictures when I was going through a Gnostic phase, and I use a lot of religious syncretism, and so if you're more traditionally minded, it might offend you, and so just a little warning. But I have a reimagining of the Egyptian goddess Bast, and also the Egyptian goddess Sekhmet, and they're members of this race. But I also aesthetically try to stay true to the ancient designs as well. I definitely do have an eye for aesthetics, and I'm actually very picky when I try to pick out some of these AI designs that where I describe some of the characters in my fiction. Some of the rejects I just don't put in, or I get or I don't save them, or I get a little more specific about what I want to see and what I don't want to see. And one thing that I noticed today that they added on the Imagine app is they have a negative bar where you can actually now put in what you don't want to see, and you don't have to type it into the main text prompt. And I guess that won't cut into your 500 word limit, which I think is pretty cool, actually. If I word it this way, I get to take everybody's retard meds. Oh, sorry, we're back. And now I'm going to tell you the story of Weird Wally. Weird Wally was an incarnation of the Lord Krishna, and he rolled in on a space motorcycle, just like a biker scout, like one of the movies that went to shit before they were good, after they were good. And he rolled in with his scraggly black hair looking like Gene Simmons all pulled up in a bun. And he had blue skin and a black biker jacket. And he rolled in and walked around with a swagger. He walked around with a swagger like Ronnie James Dio. And he said his famous slogan, "Ain't that some shit? Ha 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 ha." And even though he was an incarnation of the Lord Krishna, he was nonetheless a devotee of the great ascended master Say Through, of which he spoke about non-stop, him being, as Weird Wally would say, the George Washington of this galaxy. And then he would look at you with them feral eyes, them wild, intense, squirrely feral eyes, the ones that would pierce right through the soul of a very man. And he said, in anticipation, as he barked again and again, "Right? Right? Nami? Right?" And let me tell you, brother, you may brush off another man, but you better damn well have an answer for an incarnation of the Lord Krishna.